all throughout there, but that was a 6,000% increase over our highest week, which is usually in January. So just unprecedented volume, but we're working really hard to shuffle folks around. We've been really strategic in moving personnel into the unemployment insurance area. Prior to the COVID-19 public health emergency, we had about 57 folks in our call center. We've moved 35 into that area from other parts of unemployment insurance, and we've had, so Bruce Paulsko is going to follow me, but very grateful to Bruce and his team volunteered just short of 40 employees to enter the call center to answer emails, to answer social media inquiries, and of course answer phone calls. And then we've also put out some pretty sizable recruitments for claim specialists. We just put out a recruitment last week for 36 claim specialists, and we had over 800 applicants. So based on the timing of onboarding some of those external hires, we are still very much prioritizing internal transfers to make sure we have folks can be onboarded more quickly than external hires. But we're hopeful that that's going to alleviate some of the pressure on the call centers. And again, just one last push also, if you're talking to potential claimants or folks that are recently unemployed, please have them go through the website, which is dwd.wisconsin.gov/UI. And we've been really working hard. I think they've been thorough and effective to update our frequently asked questions to make sure folks are able to navigate that system. We just updated the how-to file video, which I think has been pretty well received and pretty effective for folks. And then maybe the last technology update, maybe a few more, but one was that if folks were entering our system and filing a claim, if they were to receive a message that normally they have to call us to follow up, well, with our call center volume, we've put it upon ourselves to call them back. And so we started that a week ago today, and that's been going very well. We've been giving folks, within 5 business days, we will call you back to answer questions about your claim. And I think folks are just really appreciative of that personal touch. We made other internal improvements, allowing folks to backdate their claims by 2 weeks, which has been helpful. And then previously also, if someone started a claim and wasn't able to finish prior to this public health emergency, if that wasn't finished in 14 days, the information will be erased. We've extended that to 28 days to accommodate, some pretty wild, schedules for folks. And I guess I'll touch on also the federal piece that's coming down. I signed an agreement with the Department of Labor last weekend to, take on some of the federal aid that's coming through. We are waiting for additional guidance, and so at this point, we are only taking applications for state unemployment insurance. But we're hopeful that, excuse me, DOL will provide the guidance necessary to be up and operational, hopefully as soon as possible, with the new legislation that's been passed for pandemic unemployment assistance, as well as a myriad of other programs. And something else your claimants might be hearing about, and we continue to talk about with the press, with the legislature, with other stakeholders, is the 1-week waiting period. And so under current Wisconsin law, claimant has to wait 1 week before they see their first benefit. And the federal program that provides the $600 on top of unemployment insurance for each state waives that first week, but only if the state does not have a 1-week waiting period. So I know the governor's team, Governor Evers, has been working really closely with the legislative leadership to make that happen. I believe that's part of the second legislative package they put forward. And so we're hopeful that will happen soon. We are able to backdate that based on, excuse me, based on the federal legislation. So we're hopeful that'll happen sooner rather than later, because there are a lot of folks that need to pay bills and put food on the table. And that first week not being funded is very problematic for claimants, but it's also problematic for our state's economy, as these businesses that remain open, are pretty hungry for revenue. If folks are going to be buying groceries and buying takeout dinners and buying necessities, folks need that first week of unemployment. So we're hopeful, we're optimistic. I think I've been very, very proud of my team. Folks have been working extremely hard around the clock for the last number of weeks to make the accommodations, make the innovations to expand our capacity, to raise their hand and move into different divisions to help meet some of these customer needs. So really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Hopefully that's been helpful. I can answer any questions, but I don't know if you want to have Bruce go next, Adam, or if you want to open up for questions first.
Right on. Yeah, let's go ahead and open up for questions. For those of you that a few of you have just joined us, if you have questions for Secretary Frostman here, please go ahead and utilize the chat function. There is a chat button in the upper right-hand corner of your browser, and you can throw questions into there. Otherwise, if you are calling in, you can press *6 to unmute and throw some questions out here. We'll give you a couple seconds to throw any questions out that you may have that's specifically around unemployment claims or the Department of Workforce Development and the job that they're doing.
And I should also maybe chip in here, Adam. I should have kicked this off. And maybe a lot of the folks on the call are familiar with unemployment insurance, but the litmus test for eligibility is being let go from a job through no fault of your own. So that's kind of the main thrust, the main determining factor of whether you're eligible, and the amount and additional eligibility is determined based on past quarters of wages and those kind of things. And the maximum amount you can earn in Wisconsin, or not earn, but receive through unemployment insurance is $370 a week. And so that's kind of the bones of the program and the structure. But like I said, the main question that folks have to ask in terms of being eligible is if they were dislocated through no fault of their own. And what we've been advising folks is, if you're unsure, if you think it's ambiguous or unclear, we've been advising folks to apply online, and that's what we have staff for, is to determine eligibility. So if you're unsure, err on the side of filing, and we can determine that in our office.
Let me ask you this. So for those on the call that have employees, typically speaking, if they have an employee that's let go through no fault of their own and they file unemployment, am I correct in my understanding that the employer is responsible for paying a portion of that unemployment insurance? And has that changed as a result of the pandemic? I'm sure there are a lot of people that have to let people go. Are they still going to be able to are they still going to be on the hook to pay that portion of the employees that they're kind of forced to let go?
Sure, that's a really good question. It's been getting asked quite a bit lately, especially as it relates to the state's unemployment insurance trust fund. And so, generally speaking, your for-profit employers are going to pay both a state and a federal unemployment insurance tax. The state tax goes to fund the trust fund, which is the vehicle from which benefits are paid, and then the federal tax goes to the Department of Labor, which then comes back to the state with the funds needed to administer the unemployment insurance program. And so at this point, for the state unemployment insurance system, it is going to be taken out of the trust fund, and it's going to need to be replenished either on a dollar for dollar basis by those that nonprofit entities pay based on their actual usage, and then the taxes from employers will replenish that. And if I know folks have asked, what happens if the trust fund is exhausted? What happens is we end up borrowing money from the federal government, which is what happened during the Great Recession. We borrowed from the feds, and there's some questions whether that would be interest-free or not. At this point, can't determine whether that's pay interest, but the feds are available for lending that money to make sure we have adequate dollars to pay our claimants.
Outstanding. Okay, thank you so much for answering that. Pete has asked, are paid employees under nonprofits eligible for benefits?
Yes, they are.
Okay, outstanding. So I think what we'll do is, since there are no other questions, we're going to go ahead and transition to Reinhardt.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, this is Dr. Jennifer Potts from Center Street, one of the kids in Milwaukee, and I have over 20 businesses that are hair salons in the cosmetology industry. Are there any benefits that are applicable for those individuals that are sole proprietors?
So the federal program that is coming out, and there's so many different names, I believe it's the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, is meant to be for those that wouldn't otherwise be eligible for state unemployment insurance. So you are correct that 1099s and independent contractors under the state's current laws are not eligible, but the federal pandemic unemployment assistance program is meant for those folks. So as soon as we have the clarity in terms of guidance from DOL, that is what the PUA is meant to be for those folks that are out of work related to COVID-19.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Outstanding. Hey, I almost forgot actually before we skip over to Reinhardt Law, who's going to be talking specifically about employment-related legal issues for employers and employees. Bruce, who's also with the Department of Workforce Development, is in the house, going to be talking about some veteran-specific issues before we move over to Reinhardt. So, Bruce, if you're with us.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Yep, you bet. And see you. Yep, there you are. Okay, Bruce,
Great.
take it away. Thank you for being here, sir.
Adding a few more things quickly. So just a reminder to everybody on the call, so that one of the offices that we manage is the Office of Veterans Employment Services, and our director, Gary Meyer, is actually on this call as well. But we just wanted to remind everybody about what we do through that office, and then I just have a couple of other bullet points for you as well. So through Gary's office, we do have local veterans employment reps around the state, and we have disabled veterans outreach program staff around the state. They are all working remotely at this point, but they are staying very actively engaged with the veterans population. So as far as veterans that may be impacted right now that are applying for unemployment or registering on our Job Center of Wisconsin system, Gary's staff are checking the registration information every day, and they are reaching out to the newly registered vets. Our DBOP staff do case management for veterans, our significantly buried veterans. They're checking, see if new vets are registering. They're contacting them. They're doing initial assessments of them to see if our staff can provide assistance to them to navigate employment and unemployment right now. We are not the unemployment specialists, but they are helping vets sometimes who have trouble navigating. So I just want to remind everybody on this call that we do have DBOP staff around the state reaching out to the vets. Our LVR staff are reaching out to businesses to make sure they're taking full advantage of our Job Center of Wisconsin system to get their job postings out there. We have added additional functionality on Job Center of Wisconsin for in-demand jobs. So our LVRs are familiar with that. They are discussing that with employers to try to get their job postings out if they have needs right now to fill positions, even though there have been so many layoffs. There are, as a reminder, clearly employers are still looking for people right now. So I wanted to make sure just to remind this group of both our LVR and DBOP staff that work to serve veterans and employers looking to hire veterans through Gary's staff. I will, after this call, send out through Saul and through Adam just a reminder of Gary's contact information. He will serve as sort of a point person right now while everybody's working remotely. Should anybody on this call have a need to connect with somebody, Gary has asked that we run that through him. So Adam, hopefully you can send out his information to everybody after this call when I give it to you.
You bet.
I did want to remind, Saul had asked, we do not, the state DWD, we're not the oversight for the USERRA, the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. Many of you are familiar with USERRA. However, when we're in normal operations, the Federal Department of Labor vet staff are actually in our same state office building as we are. They are the ones that handle either complaints, inquiries, questions related to USERRA. When I send out through Adam the contact information, I'm also going to provide contact information for a gentleman by the name of Mike Beck. He serves Wisconsin for the Department of Labor vets as far as any USERRA related questions that might be out there. In addition, of course, all the information on the DOL.gov vets website specific to USERRA will be critical. So I will make all of those pieces available through the contact information I funnel back up through Saul and through Adam. So I think, we could talk a lot about all the various services we provide, but I think what's most important right now is to remind everybody that we do have staff throughout the state. They are watching and tracking all the veterans that are registering on our system right now in particular and reaching out to them remotely to see if there's any services that we can help them with.
Outstanding. Thank you, Bruce. Hey, and as far as the contact information is concerned, if you put that over in the chat on the right-hand side, this call is being recorded, but the chat's also being logged as well. And you can send that to me, and I'll follow up with everybody with the video and whatnot. We did have one question and I'm not sure if this is you or Secretary Fossman, better question. Can furloughed employees still claim unemployment?
That's a good question. Yeah, sorry.
No, I
can
follow
follow
up
up.
on you. Yep.
Yeah, I can follow up, Adam.
Sure, go ahead.
I'll say I can follow up after the call if that works. I'll have to dig in a little deeper.
Oh, sure, you bet. Yep, and I will reach out to everybody to get that answered. So Don Placidi from the Wisconsin Departments of Veterans Affairs. Bruce, I think this question is for you. What is the number of veterans registering through the website?
So what I'll do is when I send the contact information, I'll quickly do a check on the stats. I can get that information immediately, and I'll send that out with the contact information, giving you an example of how many people have been registering in the last few weeks, plus how many total vets we have registered.
Outstanding. Thank you, Bruce. And so what we'll do, everybody, is I'll make sure, as we did with last week's call, I will be sure to follow up with everybody with a link to the video for this call if you need to relook at some of the stuff that we went over, and also a transcript for the chat, but also some additional information as discussed on the call. So before we transition here quick over to Reinhardt, we're just dealing with a couple technical things, but I think we have them ironed out. I just want to remind everybody very quickly that I know a lot of our businesses and industries are facing very unique challenges as a result of this pandemic. The nonprofit world and be it a C3 or a C6, it is no exception to that. And chambers of commerce are facing unique challenges, as are all nonprofits, and in particular in our area of interest, veteran-serving nonprofits are no exception to that. So I wanted to bring everyone's attention kindly to a relief fund that's being put together in collaboration with Lift for the 22. So Wisconsin Veterans Chamber of Commerce is teaming up with Lift for the 22, acting as a fiscal agent to put this United COVID Relief Fund together. I'm going to put the link in the chat for everybody here. If you click on that link, it says Lift for the 22 there, and it talks about their partnership with us. This money is going to be distributed specifically to Wisconsin veteran-serving nonprofit organizations. So right now we have an anonymous donor that has pledged to match every dollar up to $10,000. So our goal is to reach that $10,000. Otherwise, we're going to leave money on the table. So I would encourage you, our veteran serving organizations save lives for our veterans and military families in the state. Simply stated, they save lives, and they make our state and our communities a better place. And they do very important work, and I know a lot of them are struggling and need the support. So I know resources are scarce, but if you personally have anything, $5, $10, $15, to $1,000. If you have any resources, please consider donating, if it is possible, to this COVID-19 relief fund. We'll get the match dollars, and we'll get that out to veteran serving organizations that are in need, that are doing important work in the state. So Guy, if I have you on the call here, I will let you. I will go ahead and let you get started. Reinhardt Law is a partner of ours for quite some time. We, for those of you that have joined us on our supplier diversity briefings, they've been the point of the spear on that. Subject matter experts is an understatement, and today they're going to be here to talk about legal issues that are relevant to employers and employees. And while he gets started, I'm going to go ahead and get his slides up and presented.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Adam, am I?
Yep. Yeah. Coming in loud and clear, friend.
Okay.
You're good. I'll go ahead and get your presentation started.
Thank you. And I apologize. We're going to have a little bit of tricky time with our slides here because unfortunately I've encountered some firewall issues on my end that keeps bumping me out of the meeting. And so Adam is going to jump in and push through our slides here. But my colleague, Christopher Sheely, and I are going to talk about some of the legal challenges and business considerations of the COVID-19 crisis. I'll say at the outset, I wish that we had more reassuring news. We'll be as reassuring as possible. But really, a lot of what we're going to share here today is to highlight some of the issues, some of the potential for businesses to recover and get assistance. But it is a rapidly developing situation on the insurance front, on the federal legislation front. We expect that the situation will be different a week from now and 2 weeks from now. We have been discussing internally, my colleagues and I, about the likelihood of there being additional relief packages pushed through in the next couple of weeks. And so that may change substantially what is available to businesses. And likewise, as we'll discuss, there's some legislative pushes and some court challenges regarding insurance coverage that may also change the landscape in the next couple of weeks. I say all of that because what we'll share here today is topical now, but certainly could change. We are working with the Chamber to set up a webinar on April 22nd, where we'll cover some of these issues in more depth. With that said, Adam, do we have the slides up? Are those available?
Yes, sir. Hey, everybody, just let me know in the chat or otherwise if you can see these slides. You're good? I can see. Okay. Yep, we are good to go. And you just go ahead and tell me when you want me to switch to the next slide. Appreciate everyone's flexibility on this. We're just ironing out the tech issues, but it looks like we got it.
Okay. Well, again, my name is Guy Temple. My colleague is Christopher Sheely. Our contact information is there on the first slide if anyone wants to reach out directly. And of course, the Chamber has our contact information as well. Go to next slide. So a brief disclaimer here. Obviously, the information we're providing is just of a general nature. It's not intended as legal advice to any of you on specific matters, facts, or situations. We have to provide this disclaimer, but I think it's important to know that all of your circumstances, your individual businesses are going to be impacted differently, and your specific fact situation is better addressed specifically by an attorney. So you're welcome to reach out to us, but we would encourage you to consult with counsel about your particular circumstances before acting on any of this information. Next slide. We're going to cover, first of all, the CARES Act and the key provisions of that, and Chris is going to walk through those, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about two major business recovery issues here. One is insurance coverage for COVID-19 losses, and the second is the ability to suspend contract obligations to the extent that becomes necessary. So with that, with the next slide, I will turn this over to Chris. Pretty, you may need to unmute your line by pressing *6.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, there he is. Hi,
yes,
Chris.
we can.
No, sorry about that. I unmuted myself on my cell phone, but I didn't know I did *6. My apologies. Guy, thanks a lot for the introduction. I am here to speak with all of you today about the CARES Act. That's the name that Congress has given the $2 trillion stimulus package that was passed and signed into law by President Trump last Friday. As Guy alluded to earlier, we are in a rapidly changing environment. We've got a multiple 100-page document with very limited guidance from various federal agencies on how this is actually going to be implemented. So while many of these comments that I'm going to make today are absolutely backed up by the statute itself, this situation is rapidly evolving. So this is, of course, subject to change once we receive additional guidance from some of these various agencies. A couple of key provisions in the CARES Act are designed to inject capital into the economy to help employers and employees alike. And really the future program that many employers are interested in right now is the Paycheck Protection Program. This is $349 billion with a B dollars that have been set aside by the federal government to be administered by the Small Business Administration in the form of loans, which can effectively convert into grants of up to $10 million per applicant. per employer. The way that this program is structured, it's designed to help employers cover payroll, rent, and utility costs for an 8-week period after the loan is originated through the SBA. Employers are eligible for 2.5 times whatever their average payroll was in the preceding year, and that's the maximum amount of the loan. And again, as I indicated earlier, the loan is designed to be used for payroll expenses, rent, and utilities. Assuming that all of the funds are used for those purposes, the loan is completely forgiven, which is an unbelievable term and asset for small businesses. Again, businesses who are under 500 employees. There is one catch. The loan is not completely forgiven if the employment figures, the head count for the employer that's receiving the loan, have dipped before and after the origination date. So say, for example, the average employment figures for the company were 100 employees prior to receiving the loan, and after the loan, they've dipped down to 50 employees by half. That would suggest that there's been a mass layoff in between receiving the loan, and the loan repayment or the loan forgiveness would be reduced accordingly. Similarly, if employees see a dip in their wages by over 25%, there would also be a dip in the amount of the loan that's forgiven by the federal government. Again, the idea behind this loan is to keep the status quo. It's to allow employers to have the capital on hand to pay for payroll, rent, and utilities, so they don't have to lay off employees, so they don't have to execute wage cuts across the board. This program goes live today as far as applications are concerned. It's a little bit interesting from a lender perspective in that this loan is administered both by the federal government directly, but also through private lenders who are SBA certified. So what I would recommend, if this is a program that you are interested in, to speak with your banker immediately. I do believe that these funds are going to go very quickly. Everyone is very interested in receiving at least a portion of these funds that are set aside because of the unbelievable forgiveness provisions that they're subject to. But as a result, they are going to go fast. So I do recommend that you contact your banker and speak about ways in which you can execute an application at your earliest convenience. The next portion of the CARES Act that I'd like to speak to is the Emergency Economic Injury Disaster Loan, or EIDL, grants. Businesses who are under 500 employees are also eligible to apply for these economic injury disaster loans through the SBA. Through the application process, and once an application is submitted for these loans, the CARES Act provides for $10,000 grants to be issued to applicants. And I believe that the time period, it's very tight, within 3 days of applying for the EIDL loan. Another great program to infuse capital into various employers across the country. The uses for these grant funds are a little bit broader than they are under the Paycheck Protection Program. Again, I'd be more than happy to speak about those individual provisions on a case-by-case basis. But suffice it to say, the uses for these particular grant funds are a little bit broader than the Paycheck Protection Program. My last point, and Secretary Frostman did a great job of teeing this up, is the expansions to state unemployment programs across the country that's provided for under the CARES Act. Again, Secretary Frostman mentioned a few of these points earlier, but really what these expanded unemployment insurance provisions do is they expand state unemployment programs in 3 major ways. One, they increase the unemployment compensation benefits available to eligible claimants by $600 per week. That's in addition to whatever benefits are owed under the state unemployment system as it currently exists. And I believe this was mentioned earlier, the maximum weekly unemployment benefits that are available to a claimant in Wisconsin are $370 per week. This would be $600 on top of that. We're seeing, near tripling the benefits that would ordinarily be available under state law through July 31st of 2020. That's when that $600 per week provision would sunset under the CARES Act. There's also an expansion in the length of time that individuals are eligible to receive unemployment benefits by 13 weeks. So these are for individuals who are, traditional claimants, employees who apply for unemployment. The maximum amount of unemployment benefit weeks that are available to claimants in Wisconsin during a 52-week period is 26. That's now been expanded by 13 weeks to 39 total weeks. So again, we see both an expansion in the amount of weekly benefits and an expansion in the length of time that those benefits are available. I do want to just underscore again, though, that extra $600 per week, that sunsets on July 31st, 2020. The expansion of the unemployment benefits that are available by 13 weeks, that will sunset December 31st of 2020. Finally, we see the pandemic unemployment assistance expansion, and that's something I know Secretary Frostman spoke to as well. That's catching a lot of headlines because what it does is expands state unemployment programs, which are typically reserved for employees, and expands it to include the self-employed, independent contractors. Think gig economy workers, for example, individuals who have exhausted or are otherwise ineligible for unemployment benefits under state law. These people would all be eligible for additional or new unemployment benefits under state law, provided it's for a reason that's related to the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, an individual who can't work because they've contracted the virus, an individual who is caring for a family member who has contracted the virus, an individual who has to quit their job or their work because of the coronavirus. There's a list of different qualifying categories that would make someone eligible under this category that are listed in the CARES Act itself. We are, at least in the legal community, we're waiting on bated breath for guidance from the Department of Labor on how the DOL is going to interpret those categories. So really right now it's sort of a wait and see. I know that our state unemployment system is being inundated with calls in the millions right now to file for unemployment benefits and to get on the system. It's going to take some time, I can only imagine, to sort out this unprecedented volume of individual claimants. But once that gets sorted out and once individuals get on the rolls, the benefits will be tremendously expanded. I don't have this point on my slide, but I do also want to just highlight one other piece of legislation that's passed through Congress to date, and that's the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. That is the act that provides for paid sick leave, 2 weeks of paid sick leave, and expanded FML, family medical leave, for individual employees of employers with fewer than 500 employees. There is a carve-out to providing some of these benefits for employers with fewer than 50 employees if providing this leave would jeopardize the viability of the business. I'd be more than happy to provide more specifics on how one can apply for this carve-out or exception, but it effectively amounts to a certification from a business representative that providing these leave benefits would indeed jeopardize the business's ability to operate on a minimal level. The nuts and bolts of these different forms of leave, the paid sick leave and the expanded family medical leave, they're fairly complex, and I don't want to get into all of those nuances on this call per se. I know this is a very high-level conversation, but suffice it to say that those leave benefits now do exist, and it's something that employers with fewer than 500 employees are going to have to grapple with moving forward as far as managing their employee population.
Hey, Chris,
so unless there's any questions.
Let me jump in here. We did have a couple of questions, and I think I may be behind on the slides. I wasn't sure if I had to stay on the key provisions thing or not, but we had a couple questions. I'm not sure, since you're calling in, I'm not sure if you can see them from the chat, so I'll relay those to you
yes,
while I move ahead in the slides. From Brian, is eligibility for this program affected by employers that accept Medicaid? And I could be mistaken, but I believe he was referring to the Paycheck Protection Program, or maybe the EIDL, I'm not sure, but can you just touch on that?
You know, to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure the answer to that question off the top of my head. I apologize.
Sure, no worries. Well, we'll see if we can't figure that out as time goes on. I'll make sure to relay that to everybody that is on the call in follow-up. Another question, what about very small businesses, for example, 2 full-time employees and 5 part-time?
And my guess, and I'm not quite sure which provision we're speaking to, but very small businesses, maybe are they eligible for this Paycheck Protection Program? And I believe that the answer is yes. They have under 500 employees, they would be eligible. Now, they wouldn't be eligible for the maximum $10 million per business loan amount, but they would be eligible for whatever 2.5 times their payroll was from an average monthly basis preceding the loan origination date. Yes, they would be eligible to apply.
Right on. Outstanding. And I see later in the slides you have some information here about insurance coverage for COVID-19 losses.
That's correct, and that's a great transition to Guy.
Okay, excellent. So before we transition to Guy, if anyone else has some questions for Chris about anything that he went over before we go on to insurance coverage, I don't see any. We'll give everybody an opportunity at the end to ask a couple more questions, but we are getting tight on time, and I want to make sure we give Guy all the time that he needs to talk about this very important issue. So, Guy, go ahead and take it away there, sir.
Sure. So first off, I want to talk a little bit about insurance coverage. I suspect that a lot of you all have already dealt with this question or may have heard what might take place, but generally speaking, business interruption coverage is going to go through a property policy and requires physical damage to property. That's what we're seeing is the big obstacle for a lot of businesses who are experiencing business interruption because of shelter-in-place orders, because of state lockdowns, and generally speaking, just because of voluntary stay-at-home measures taken by individuals across the country and here in Wisconsin especially. The coverage for physical damage to property, there are certainly cases in which you could have coverage. For example, if you actually experience a contamination at your property, standard business interruption coverage will probably cover for a shutdown, for sterilization of a facility that's been contaminated, because generally courts find that contamination will constitute direct physical damage. But that doesn't really get to the heart of the problem that most businesses are having, particularly those in the service industry or those that have been deemed non-essential. And that is the gigantic downturn as a result of these government stay-at-home orders and shelter-in-place orders. But there may still be opportunities for coverage. What I would say from the outset, and I've got the bottom of the slide here, but review your policy language carefully. Some types of clauses that we may see that are sometimes written into coverage include ingress or egress clauses. Those are provisions that may provide coverage for circumstances in which a condition, some kind of contingency has prevented ingress or egress, entry or leaving of your property. And more likely that is going to be where there is actually coronavirus related property damage. For example, your business is shut down because of a contamination event for some period of time. But it's possible that ingress and egress may also cover circumstances here where customers are prevented from accessing your business, even in the absence of virus contamination or actual physical damage to your property. That's going to depend on the policy language. More frequently, ingress and egress coverage is looking at things like physical impediments to your property, like a collapsed construction project has blocked the road, down power lines or mudslides, those sort of things. But depending on the nature of the language of your policy, it might be read broadly and it might include coverage in these circumstances. Another one is civil authority coverage. Again, these are not in every standard property policy or commercial general liability, but if you have a civil authority coverage extension, it may be that you have coverage where a civil authority, like the state government here, has expressly required that your property be closed for some reason, and would cover a loss sustained during that period of time as a result of a order of a civil or military authority that's preventing access to your property. So as long as this specific circumstance, a virus, is not expressly excluded, it may be that a civil authority coverage extension would cover the coronavirus quarantine order. Again, it'll be important to look at the language of your policy and what is in there. Another policy provision that may cover here is contingent business interruption coverage. This is coverage that applies where someone in your supply chain has been interrupted because of a shutdown due to coronavirus contamination. So this is still going to be looking at the physical damage to property, but not necessarily your property. So for example, one of your raw material suppliers has to shut down their production lines because of a contamination. That slowed their ability to get materials to you. You have losses as a result of that. That may fall under your contingent business interruption coverage if your policy includes that. That may cover your lost profits, other economic losses that result from damage to someone in your supply chain. And it might not just be a supplier. It could be your customer. You may be selling goods to a customer who they have to shut down their business, and therefore they have to break their contract with you. That may also fall under contingent business interruption coverage. So careful investigation and review of the policy is important there. You probably heard on the news, again, that business interruption coverage is generally not going to extend to the pandemic. And the reason for that is, as insurance carriers are currently telling Congress and telling their insureds, is that they can't be expected to cover an event that happens simultaneously to every business in the country, essentially. But again, there could be provisions within your policy that will cover some portion of your losses if we look at that carefully. What we are seeing in addition is potential legislative action to address this. About 2 weeks ago, a number of members of Congress sent out an inquiry to some of the major insurance companies nationally, asking them to extend business interruption coverage to losses resulting from stay-at-home orders and quarantines, essentially asking them to extend or supersede the coverage or coverage exclusions of policies. As you can imagine, the insurance industry did not respond that well to that, and has come back and with communications directed to Congress and public communications explained of the risks of instability to the insurance market if all of these insurers are forced somehow by legislative action to do that, to extend coverage that isn't otherwise there, or particularly coverage that's expressly excluded, basically to amend contracts, policies that they have with insured. Nonetheless, some state legislatures are already attempting to pass legislation that would require this, would require businesses to extend coverage for COVID-19 related losses. The first of these, and I think the farthest along, is New Jersey. There is a bill in the New Jersey state legislature that would, I'm looking at the wording here right now, but essentially, I think as of March 9th, any insurance policy which includes business interruption would be understood to include coverage for interruption due to the global virus transmission or pandemic. And there have been a lot of critics to that from the insurance industry. but also there's questions onto the constitutionality under state constitutions, with forcing modifications of contracts like that. I personally don't think that these legislative actions are going to get very far because they will immediately be challenged in court. It is unlikely that, and Massachusetts and Ohio are following in New Jersey's path, but it seems unlikely that any of those state legislative actions are going to result in insurers covering these things in the near term because they're going to get tied up in court if any of this legislation passes. But that said, it doesn't mean that political pressure won't encourage insurers to take some other action. Also possible that Congress will step in with legislation that would, basically provide reinsurance for carriers to cover these things, similar to the program, the Terrorism Risk Insurance Act, which provides reinsurance in the event of shutdowns related to some kind of terrorism event. It's also possible that act could be amended to cover losses related to pandemics. So, I think that it's important to note it's unlikely that legislative action is going to change the terms of your policy, but it is possible that legislative action will either put pressure on insurers to take certain steps, or may enable insurers to cover losses based on reinsurance from the government. We're going to continue to monitor that and provide updates. The other piece here is court challenges. We've already seen some of the industry are filing lawsuits against carriers, asking the court to order them to include coronavirus losses in their coverage. A couple of restaurants out in California, the famous French Laundry restaurant, has already brought a suit there against Lloyd's of London. And the same attorney is bringing a lawsuit in New Orleans as well. So, it's possible that these lawsuits will also, force some action from the insurance industry. We'll continue to monitor that. But the most important thing right now with respect to your insurance coverage is to review your policy carefully. If there is potentially coverage for even some portion of losses that you're experiencing, you should make a claim. It's possible that coverage for certain things may interfere with eligibility under some of the CARES Act opportunities, and so you want to be careful with that as well. We can certainly answer questions on that end if there's any interference with your eligibility. There'd be concerns about double dipping between insurance coverage and other coverage through the federal legislation that's passed. But for now, I would say review your policy carefully, look to see if there's any opportunity there. Next slide.
Yep, you bet. And hey, Guy, we're getting here. I hate to rush you here, but we're kind of getting towards the end. I want to make sure that we get everything in here. I just wanted to give you a heads up. We got a few minutes left. Okay,
I will move quickly.
Okay.
Basically, last point here: suspending contract obligations. If you've got a contract with a customer or with a supplier that either your supplier is now unable to perform because of the pandemic, or you are unable to perform, there may be opportunities for you to suspend performance there. The first big one is if you have a force majeure clause in your contract. That is a clause that typically will say something along the lines of, in the event of a natural disaster or an act of God, you're relieved from performing. Look to that. The circumstances will depend on the specific contract language. It might include pandemics. It might simply say act of God. It might expressly exclude public health situations. So that's the first place you would look. If you don't have a clause like that, it's still possible that you can argue that you are no longer obligated to perform, or your own supplier may make this argument to you, where your performance has been made impracticable by the occurrence of an unforeseeable contingency. That means under common law, under the Uniform Commercial Code contract law, you can argue that, look, there's some circumstance that neither side ever anticipated would come up. That circumstance has happened. I think we could probably include the current coronavirus pandemic among those. And that's made your performance impracticable, which courts are looking at. It doesn't just mean that it got more expensive for you to perform. For example, if one of your suppliers shut down and now you have to buy raw material from a more expensive supplier, that's probably not going to meet the definition. But if you have lost your entire supply chain, or you have to shut down your facility completely because you're non-essential and therefore you can't perform a contract, then it probably rises to that level. Under either circumstance, you are going to need to provide notice to the other party to your contract, to your customer, and that notice may have a specific timeline in your contract if it's a force majeure provision. Under the common contract law, it's going to be reasonable notice. You would want to do that as soon as possible, put your customer on notice. Most importantly, keep good documentation related to that. So if you need to make efforts to mitigate the problem. So if you've got a supplier that's shut down and you're saying, I don't think I can find this anywhere else, keep documentation of your efforts to do so. Show them that you have moved heaven and earth to try and get your raw materials, and you just can't, because all of that will be part of the supporting evidence in the extent that you have to argue that you can't perform a contract. That's all I have on suspending contract obligations. And the next slide, I think, has the information, Adam, on our website and where we have more detail. Reinhardt is maintaining a coronavirus resource center. My colleagues are literally churning out multiple articles a day on these various issues and others, tax, real estate, healthcare related issues. So please check that out. I think the Chamber has been sharing that on their resource page as well. Yep. And if you have specific questions, please reach out. I am back in the meeting here, and I see that Tom has an additional question regarding furloughed employees, or I'm sorry, a comment regarding furloughed employees. So if you want to go ahead and share that,
sure.
That's all that we have from Reinhardt.
All right. Thank you, Reinhardt. You guys are awesome, and thanks for sharing your time with us. Tom added in the chat, in case we run out of time, furloughed employees can absolutely apply and be eligible for unemployment benefits. We interpret furloughs as layoffs. With any situation, we encourage folks to just apply under certain circumstances. Yeah, yes, sir.
That's Caleb. I'm signed in under Tom Brisky. That was Caleb, but just wanted to follow up on it. Sorry about that. Yeah, that was we had a IT person set up this Google account for it. So that was me replying. Good. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Evan. I have to hop off, but thanks for the invitation, and folks can feel free to follow up if they have any questions.
You bet. Thank you for joining us, Secretary Frostman. Great information all around. But yes, so they treat furloughs as layoffs. So again, just encourage folks, when in doubt, go ahead and apply for those unemployment benefits before everybody heads out here. I know we're a couple minutes over. Again, I would like to let me end my screen share. I would like to remind everybody to please, let's see, there I am again. I'd like to remind everybody to please visit wiveteranschamber.org. We have a coronavirus resource page. In addition to visiting Reinhardt Law and their resource page. Please, if you have resources available, again, now is the time to donate to this United COVID Relief Fund that helps veterans serving nonprofits in the state of Wisconsin. I'm going to share the link again. For everyone that joined us on our COVID resource page will be this video and transcript from today's call if you need to re-reference anything. But if nobody else has any additional questions, you can always follow up with us at any time. We're happy to hear from you. Where's the link for the $500 grant? That's going to be on our COVID resource page, and let me get that up. Actually, Aaron, are you still on the call? Can you send that over, Aaron or Kit? If you have it up, if you know where it is handy. I'll stay on the line here for those of you that are interested. And again, that $500 grant is for people that are in good standing with existing chambers of commerce that are on that list. And it is if you are a for-profit business that makes less than 1 million annual revenue, I believe. So we'll get that link out to you here shortly. Maybe I can find it myself. COVID guide and relief fund, member guide. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording just because nobody wants to hear me babble on. If you want to find out that grant, go ahead, hang on the line.